Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wildcard Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Ben Pulowski. I'm part of our Learning Center here at Geotab. Our topic for today is a guide to IOX add-ons. So we are going to be taking a look at some of the different hardware that can be added to your Go device for expandability purposes, and the different data that you can collect and what you can do with that data. So I am joined by Taimur Khan, who is our technical project coordinator here at Geotab, and he is going to be presenting to you on these different IOX devices that we have. Taimur, thank you so much for joining us here today on Wildcard Wednesday.
Hey, Ben. So we're just going to jump into it. I'll just go over some of the offerings of the IOX that Geotab provides, and we'll go over, the basic purposes and what kind of data you can really expect from that. And we'll also try to provide some real-world applications for you guys, just to get an idea of how they're used by existing customers or what the intention was. So as Ben mentioned, my name is Taimur Khan. I work in the product team at Geotab under Musa. And yeah, today, so IOX basically stands for Input-Output Expanders. They were developed by Geotab several years ago, but since then we've grown the IOX line to about 17 different products that we offer. And they all serve a different function or a different purpose overall. And over the past few years, we've really started developing more and more IOXs because of our focus on the integration with third-party applications. So throughout the presentation, you'll hear me reference add-on devices, which basically means anything that adds on to the Go device or anything that connects to the IOX. And it includes stuff that's made by other companies, like third-party companies that we work with, other partners that we work with. Some examples that you'll hear throughout the presentation are Valor, Beware, Mobileye, WiseLink, etc. Okay, so let's start off. The very first one, and one of the most popular IOXs that we offer right now, is the IOX AUX. It's basically used to monitor up to 8 digital signals, and it reports a value of 1 or 0, so a binary value, depending on what the voltage state is. One IOX monitors up to 4 signals, but you can connect up to 2 of them on any one Go device to track 8. And like I said, it measures voltage changes, so voltage changing from when a switch is triggered or when a certain condition changes. As the voltage changes, we'll measure the voltage change and we'll basically report a value of 0 for when it's at a stable state, and when it changes, we'll report a value of 1 to say something has happened. The IOX AUX is one of the smartest IOXs that we offer. It is self-learning, so it'll learn the voltage of the signal you're monitoring, and it auto-configures and auto-calibrates to that signal to report the value that you need. So there's very little programming that goes into it. It's very much self-learning in the capability of how it provides the data. Some specific real-world applications that we see it being used for, a lot of school bus operation companies use it to monitor things that are not reported to the vehicle's ECM. So when the door is open or closed, stop sign on the school bus is out or in. A lot of our customers use it for when the brake pedal is depressed and how often the driver is braking and how hard he's braking. They also measure things like lights being on in the car, stuff that basically is not reported through the vehicle ECM, which a lot of older vehicles or a lot of large trucks do not report these values. It's also used by a lot of companies that do retrofitting for vehicles. They'll add their own hardware onto the vehicle, similar to like a stop sign on a school bus. So it's very useful. There's a variety of things that it can be used for. Next up, we have the IOX BT, basically stands for Bluetooth, and it monitors any Bluetooth beacon with a public MAC address. So something that can report to any reading device. Any beacon will work. It just needs to have a public MAC address. That's the main requirement. The beacons that we use right now and any beacons that we support can include a variety of sensory information like temperature, illuminance, as well as in and out of range. So a lot of our customers use it for asset tracking, and it's excellent for tracking, items that are, inventory containers, tools and equipment, small generators, stuff that you don't want to leave on the site or you don't want to leave at your location. And it just kind of improves the on-time delivery, and it improves cost for misplaced equipment, stuff like that. It is also one of the 4 IOXs that uses the add-on integration that Geotab offers, and that can be accessed through my.geotab.com/SDK, where it kind of mentions what kind of the data structure needs to look like, what the third-party device needs to be transmitting to the Bluetooth beacon, and stuff like that. So basically, it kind of provides the functionality to be used for a variety of different reasons, and we kind of leave it up to the reseller or the customer to integrate it with whatever need they see fit based on our SDK. Next up, we have the IOX Buzz, which I like to call our most basic IOX because it really does do just one basic function. It's used to amplify the in-vehicle alerts, and these are things like driver feedback, rule exceptions triggered by my Geotab, anything that would cause a device to beep. The IOX Buzz just amplifies it for applications where there's, you're working at a loud construction site, you're sitting in a large vehicle that, may be more noise inside the cabin, just to make sure that the driver can hear when something is wrong or when a rule is triggered. It kind of just elevates that noise to a point where it's hearable. But other than that, it doesn't do any sort of specific function. It is our most basic, and it is not considered a smart IOX. Okay, moving on. The IOXCAN that we offer, it came out about 2 years ago when we were really looking to do some integration with third-party vendors. We really needed a device that could read information like a normal CAN line would. So we added a new CAN line into the Go device that can read through the IOXCAN. It basically is used for transmitting data through the Go device to my Geotab from any third-party device. It integrates with many IOX add-on offerings like Mobileye, the Advanced Collision Avoidance System, or Valor's tire pressure monitoring system, and a lot of other partners that are available on Geotab Marketplace. This is also one of the IOXs that uses the add-on integration documentation. Again, that's available on my.geotab.com/SDK. And that'll give you all the information for, again, how the data structure needs to look like and what the steps are to integrate any sort of third-party device over the CAN network to my Geotab. The only caveat in this is that you need to make sure that we can recognize what kind of device is sending this information. So the documentation will lay out the steps that the reseller or the customer will need to follow to provide us with basic information about what the device is or does, and we can add that into our firmware and make sure the device data will be supported overall. The next one, and one of the more unique IOXs that we offer, are the substance spreader IOXs. So we have 4 in total. Initially, we started off with the IOX DJ, and then we added more and more substance spreader companies over time. So what the IOX spreaders do is that they basically monitor how much material and how long and how far the material was spread. This is material like salt, sand. Sometimes they do a liquid salt and water mix that they spread over areas where fleets operate in winter regions. So northern Canada, some parts of the northern United States, people will use substance spreaders a lot just to make sure that the roads are clear. But in order to make sure that they're not spreading too much and to kind of conserve on the amount that they're spreading and how long they're spreading and where they're spreading, they like to monitor the amount of the salt spread. So it kind of integrates with a variety of different suppliers. So like I said, initially it started off with the Dickie John, which integrates with their control point units. But then since then we've added the ComSpread, which works with the Rexroth CS440 and 550 units. The CRS works with the SpreadSmart RX system, and the IOX FAM works with the Force America 5100 EX. So if any of your customers or if any of you are using those kinds of substance spreaders, then we can easily integrate with it. Anything else would need to be a development project on our side, but these are the most 4 common ones that we've seen in the industry. And like I said, it's useful for vehicles or fleets in winter regions. And it kind of helps to improve the efficiency and reduce the waste of what you're spreading. Some cities also have regulations for how much and how long and where you can spread salt and other materials now for de-icing of the roads. So this is kind of make sure that everybody's in line and kind of keeps track of what is being spread where. The next one is the IOX Garmin. And this is one of our oldest IOXs. This was initially developed more than 3 years ago, and since then we've added, different capabilities with traffic, different regions that we support. So what the IOX Garmin is that it basically is a link between a Go device and a Garmin device. And the Garmin device is not a connected device, so it won't be connected to any sort of cellular network. It would just be getting all the data from the Go device. So that's where the link comes in, where there's an actual link between the Go device, which gets all the data and sends it to the Garmin. And the kind of data that it gets is any sort of vehicle driver dispatch communication. So this includes, driver messaging features. So you can send a driver instructions on where to go if a delivery is canceled or if there's an extra stop. It also gives the dispatcher the ability to send routing information to the Garmin, where you can tell the driver what kind of deliveries he has to do over the day, or change them as the day goes by if someone cancels an order or someone else asks to reschedule. And like I said, over time, we have added different capabilities for supporting this in Europe, in Australia, in South America, with different models of the IOX Garmin. And we also have a traffic version that you see up there in the picture, the IOX Garmin WT. Comes with a traffic module built into the cable provided by Garmin that will, receive any sort of traffic information over Garmin network to any sort of equipped and capable Garmin GPS unit. It's ideal for companies where there's multiple stops that need to be made, delivery companies, logistics companies, and it just basically improves the efficiency of the fleet, making sure that they're driving in the most efficient manner. The routing information that is sent down is optimized in my GeoTab to decrease the driving amount, and it basically improves the communication with the driver. A lot of regions have started making cell phone use illegal when the vehicle is being operated. So this kind of gives dispatchers the ability to send communication down to the driver that's outside of the cellular device. Next up, the IOX Go Talk, which is one of our newest IOXs, and is basically a tool used by fleets for driver coaching and improving driver habits overall. It provides verbal feedback on safety and road performance of the driver. If they're wearing their seatbelt, if they're driving too fast, harsh braking, you can coach the driver in the cabin to make sure that he's putting on a seatbelt, to make sure he's not driving too fast or too harshly. It just provides the feedback based on the default driver feedback rules in my GeoTab. Or you can also use custom verbal feedback based on the exception rules in my GeoTab. So you can actually program it to say whatever it needs to say. There are canned responses that the Go Talk will speak on certain conditions, but you can also program it to tell it whatever it needs to speak. Due to the near real-time nature of the Go Talk, it works best on the Pro Plus plan, purely due to the frequency of data that's being reported. We do get data more often from devices that are on Pro Plus. It gives them the active tracking feature in my GeoTab. So the quicker the feedback that we can get down from the server to the Go device, the better for the Go Talk to speak right when the exception or right when the driver breaks the rule that he needs to be coached on. And it's for a lot of reasons, but a lot of the time it's mainly used for seatbelt use, speed limits, leveraging the excellent information for speed limits in my GeoTab. If you exceed the number of hours you're supposed to be driving, etc. Next up, we have the IOX NFC Reader. So the NFC Reader is basically a NFC chip that's incorporated onto the IOX, and all it does is that it reads a NFC key fob or sticker provided by GeoTab, and reads a unique ID to the Go device. So it's useful for when vehicles in fleets are shared among drivers, and so you can identify which driver drove what vehicle when. And it can be used to create specific rules in my GeoTab for drivers. You can also pull any of the reports from my GeoTab for rule exceptions, trip history, any report from my GeoTab, and you can break it down by the driver. So you can see how long driver A drove versus driver B, or how many exceptions driver A had versus driver B. It helps with the driver scorecard feature in my GeoTab, being able to identify which driver was driving when. And overall, it's one of our more common IOXs because a lot of fleets want to be able to track their drivers. There was a recent feature that we released for the NFC Reader where you can whitelist a set of IDs or a set of NFC key fobs so that the NFC will only accept those and no others. You can do this when you want to break down the fleet and only give access to certain vehicles for certain drivers. And you can always tell which drivers were driving without swiping in and when you have the whitelist on there. For more information on the whitelist, you can refer to the NFC documentation, which I'll get to at the end. I'll mention all the documentation that you can get, but that'll kind of lay out what needs to happen for the whitelisting feature. The IOX Output M, one of the newer IOXs, And very basically, it kind of just controls a relay in the vehicle in real time. So you set the trigger for a predefined condition within my geotab, or you set the trigger whenever you want, basically. And it kind of pushes down a message to the Go device, will trigger an external relay, an external light, buzzer, anything to notify the driver of a certain situation. It's also used in conjunction with the SPR relay kit that geotab offers. So it connects directly into it using one of the black connector that you see on the screen there. And it's a very seamless integration with that hardware that we offer as well. It's used for a lot of the time when drivers need to be told of something when they're in a certain zone, or when there has to be a wide notice sent out to all drivers. A lot of the integration is in my geotab, but it's also available in the SDK as well. So the customer or the reseller can program the output M to trigger basically whatever condition they need to. It's a very easy integration through the SDK as well. One of the more rare IOXs, the IOX Set IRD, basically it allows the Go device to communicate over the Iridium satellite network, which is the world's only global coverage network. And it allows communication from the Go device in areas that are outside of cellular coverage. So it's very useful for fleets that travel out of cellular coverage very often, but need tracking and emergency capabilities for when the driver is in trouble or there's any issues. The IOX Sat IRD also comes with the functionality for a alert switch, which is triggered by the driver in the event of an emergency, an accident, something going wrong with the vehicle. He triggers the switch and it sends a log to my geotab over the Iridium network of said emergency in near real time. The delay is very, very small. The Iridium network is, like I said, a global coverage network, and it offers a lot of capabilities, but the data transfer is expensive. So data is transferred only at 30-minute intervals. So while they're out of coverage on my geotab, you will see a breadcrumb trail of them going from one position to another. Not like the normal nice tracking that you'll see with the normal Go device. But in all this time that the Iridium is communicating the information, the Go device will still be recording all the GPS information. So when the vehicle travels back into cellular coverage, all that breadcrumb trail will be connected and show as a normal trip like it would with any other Go device. And like I said, it's useful for drivers in remote areas. It's used a lot by the mining industry, workers in remote repair services. A lot of oil and gas companies use this as well. Northern Canada, Australia, some European customers also leverage the Iridium, just because for regulation reasons, they need to have communication with the driver and the device, but don't necessarily need to get the data in real time. And the package of the IOX from geotab is provided with the IOX cable itself and the Iridium modem, which is that gray box that you see there, as well as the antenna, which is that black square. So everything in the kit for the IOX is provided by geotab. And lastly, for today, we have the IOX USB. So initially, the IOX USB was developed just to provide charging and powering smartphones or tablets. But since then, we've kind of moved it into a more smart IOX category where it can also be used to integrate with third-party add-on devices. Basically, it's used similar to the IOXCAN or the IOX Bluetooth, and it just sends additional information through the Go device from third-party add-on devices. So as such, it's also used for the add-on integration on the SDK website. So that's my.geotab.com/SDK again. And initially, when we released it just for providing charging and powering, it was useful for fleets that were using Geotab Drive, the hours of service application. While it's not required for ELD compliance for the HOS tablet to be powered by the Go device, it is in the requirement that the tablet does need to be powered. So this kind of just gives it kind of like an easy setup for fleets just to connect it directly to the Go device, which provides the power to the tablet for HOS purposes. So that's all that I had in terms of IOXs. Like I said, we have about 17 total. There are some that we did not cover here because they're more of the niche IOXs, but I'll just mention some of them. We have the IOX RS232, which operates on the 232 protocol. It is similar to the IOXCAN and the IOX USB. It's the fourth IOX that uses the add-on integration on the SDK website, and it basically cuts into things like Vulcan scale meters, any sort of third-party devices that communicate on RS-232. Actually, all of the substance spreaders are based off the RS-232 protocol as well. So the hardware is very similar to the CRS and the comm spread for the RS-232. And one other one that we have announced again recently is the IOX analog. Similar to the IOX aux that we talked about initially, the very first IOX, it also measures for signals, but the analog actually reads an analog signal, so it reads a voltage from 0 to 30 volts, and it'll report any voltage from 0 to 30 volts. Instead of just a 0 and 1 binary information, it reports analog information. And that's useful for anything from, fuel level to scales, anything that reports a value of voltage. The IOX analog can be used to record that value, and then the conversion for like from 0 to 30 volts to 0 to 100% fuel level. That conversion is done in my Geotab through the reports. Other than that, that's it for the IOXs. You can always go to geotab.com, and under support and support documentation, we have a section for all the IOXs and harnesses provided by Geotab. And under the IOXs, we have everything that you guys will need for the different offerings from Geotab. If I go back just one slide here, for all the substance spreaders, we do have a substance spreader protocol document, which will detail out the exact models of the substance spreaders that we support. And it'll also tell you what kind of information we get from each substance spreader. So not all substance spreaders are equal, unfortunately. They don't all report the same information. Some of them may report all like material spread, the amount, duration, and distance, while some may only report duration and distance. So it's very important for you to see which substance spreader that the company is using, and then just compare that to the protocol document to make sure we get the information that is required. Other than that, that is the end. So if there's any questions, we can take them now, I think.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Taimur. That was very informative. We did have a few questions come through here. One question was, so if I have a customer using the IOXCAN for Mobileye, do we need to let Geotab know the device's serial number so they can update the firmware?
The device serial number for the Go device, yes, it's always good to be on the latest firmware. But if they're already using it for the Mobileye device, then the functionality should also already be there. If you're asking about the firmware of the Mobileye, then unfortunately, we don't currently do that through the Go device. The firmware is updated separately, I believe. So unfortunately, I don't think right now we can update the firmware of the Mobileye.
Gotcha. The satellite, this is a question that we get a lot, is exactly what data are we able to send through the satellite network? We get GPS, but we often get people asking about, can we send ignition? Can we send accelerometer data? Can it be used to send, hours of service duty status logs for people in an outlying area? So exactly what are we capable of sending?
So by default, the Iridium is configured through custom parameters that you add to the Go device. It sends ignition on and off. It sends the panic or the alert notifications that I mentioned. And it also sends the GPS pings every 30 seconds. Unfortunately, like I said, due to the cost and the nature of how the data is transferred, we don't send any sort of engine data, and that includes accelerometer data. But if there is a specific requirement or a specific application that a customer needs it for, then I would just suggest emailing the solutions team or npi@geotab.com, and we can always take a look at the request to get other data through Iridium. But right now, just due to the cost, and we don't charge customers anything other than a monthly fee for the use of the Iridium. So just because of the cost of the data transfer, we kind of keep it just limited to ignition, GPS every 30 minutes, and panic or alert notifications.
Okay. So you had mentioned for IOX NFC, there's a whitelist feature where I believe you said it would only allow certain drivers to swipe into the vehicle. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the whitelist feature, what it does is it stores a static list of NFC IDs onto the Go device that then is used by the NFC reader to confirm if the person swiping is allowed and they're on the whitelist. So only IDs on the whitelist will be allowed, and there's a feedback to the driver where there's a red light if they're not on the whitelist, and there's a green light on the NFC that if they are on the whitelist. But yeah, essentially only drivers on the whitelist will be allowed, and the NFC will only read the IDs for those on the whitelist.
So if a driver who is not on the whitelist attempts to swipe into a vehicle, what happens?
So there's a few things that you would need to kind of control that, but initially all it does is it gives them a red notification to say that they're not on the whitelist, so they're not allowed to swipe in on that vehicle. If you do use a relay, then there are other options to maybe disengage the vehicle, not let it start, stuff like that, for a driver that is not allowed to be on the whitelist.
Okay.
So while they may swipe in, if the company policy is to make sure that you swipe in and then you only drive when you see a positive notification, then if they swipe in and you're seeing a trip with no driver, then you know that someone unauthorized was driving it.
Okay. Can third-party NFC stickers be integrated? Think of driver's license control, was the question that came through.
So in terms of third-party NFC fobs or stickers, it's something that we're still kind of investigating on our side. There have been other requests that have come in, but there is a very certain type of fob that's needed. I don't have that information on me, unfortunately, but I can always get that later. That needs to be used, but that question has come up, and unfortunately, right now we're still looking at it. So again, if there's a specific need or requirement or a feature request, I would email solutions engineering or npi@geotab.com, and we can always take a look.
Question on IX USB for fleets using Geotab Drive. Remind me, is this mostly for charging the tablet or smartphone? Yeah, that's correct. In order to use Geotab Drive and ELD, there actually does not need to be a physical connection between the tablet and the Go device as far as data is concerned. The cable is for just charging the mobile device, the tablet or the smartphone. Taimur, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, whatever you're using the Geotab Drive application on, it's mainly just used for powering. And the requirement for ELD, like I said, is only that the tablet that you're using the Geotab Drive application or any HOS application is powered. It's not specifically that it's powered through the telematics device, but it just makes it kind of like a seamless integration and installation.
Can you confirm that the Bluetooth beacon IOX is compatible with both standard protocols, Eddystone, Google, and iBeacon, Apple?
So far we have tried iBeacon and I believe Eddystone. I don't know about the Google one, but that is something I can find out after the call.
In your opinion, is there any one of these IOXs that is severely underutilized? You know, if people knew about this and what it could do, it would be used much more frequently.
I think the power of the substance spreaders is always overlooked. It is because it does serve a kind of a niche market where not all customers will use substance spreaders. But I would definitely say that there's that one, and the output M I would say is very the potential for the integrations that are possible is very high, but it is one of the more underutilized ones in the industry because of the fact that there's a whole integration process. It definitely is one of the most powerful ones that we offer. Being able to control anything in the vehicle through a simple command remotely is a very powerful feature in my opinion.
Is Beware, BLE, supported in the Geotab portal yet?
So we do support the beacons and we do read the information from them and transfer it to my Geotab. Unfortunately, the only thing that we don't show in my Geotab right now is we don't break down the data based on the beacon ID. We do that in custom reports. So if you download a report from a Geotab, it will tell you the beacon ID and all the information that came from it. But unfortunately, we can't break that down in my Geotab yet to create certain rules for specific beacons and stuff like that. So we do support a few Beware products in terms of the beacon. They're the ones that provide excellent beacons that have illuminance and temperature and impact sensory information. So we are integrated with those, and the information does go through my Geotab. It's just accessing the information is either through the SDK or custom reports.
All right. Taimur, thank you so much for presenting here today on Wildcard Wednesday. We really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for taking some time out of your day. Hope you have a great day and a great week, and we'll see you next time. Thanks everyone.